Society, and I'm also on the board of directors of the Cecil County Farm Museum. It's Thursday, March 30th, 2022, and we're here today at the Historical Society to interview Mr. George Reynolds, who's a lifelong resident of Cecil County and who grew up on the Broadland Farms owned by Hoagland Gates. And we're here today to have him tell us what he remembers. So George, let's start off with some of your particulars. When were you born and where?
Oh, I was born September the 10th, 1922, over near Glasgow, Delaware on a farm. But when I was 2 months old, my family moved to Elk Mills, so I grew up in Elk Mills. And that's, be 105 months.
That's not too far off.
No, that's not too far. We're playing a big
Well,
farm.
I'm glad we're having this opportunity to talk.
Yes, all right.
So, how did you come to live and work on the Broadlands Farm?
When I was 11 or 12 years old, my family broke up. And my mother took me, and my father took the other brother, Rodney. And she had no way of supporting herself, so she rented me out to this farm. And Mr. James Guyverson was a tenant farmer. Hoagland Gates did not do the hay and all that. He was pretty well off that money, and he owned everything. So that's why I grew up on that farm. So I got to know Hoagland.
So you actually lived there?
No, I lived in the tenant house, which it was 192 acres, if I remember right. And there was a tenant house over at Elk Mills at the top of the hill where the quarry is. And had a lot of barns and stuff there. Then on the other side of the road where Hoagland was, it was all really one farm. So James H. Guyverson was the tenant farmer that took care of the place. So since I didn't have any home, I lived with them and worked on the farm. And so Mr. Gates and I became friends, and he helped me a lot. And one of the things he did, in the summertime, he liked to cut the grass. Now, we had a gasoline mower. He cranked it and kicked back and broke his arm. So I made him mad, so he cut all his grass by hand. So one day a week, I got to come from the farm and work for Mr. Gates. And we would push till he got tired, and then he would stop and sit on the thing, and they'd grab his hands, and he'd start smoking and talking. So we became very good friends. In fact, if I go on with that just a little bit later,
George, let me interrupt for just 1 second. Look at the camera a fair amount too, because that's people are going to be. Yeah,
okay,
I forgot to tell you that. Sorry.
All right, now, so one of the things he did for me, I didn't have any way of going to college or going to school, so he taught me into going into the service. He said, "You can win the Navy, the Air Force. They got beautiful schools, so you ought to go there." And I did. I joined the Navy, and when I joined the Navy, I wanted to get an education, so I had to sign up for 6 years. I said, I'll do that easy, stand on my head. I'm going to be 24 when it's up, I can get out. But the last year was horrible. The war was over, it was horrible. I wanted to get out so bad. So Hoagland did me that favor. And he also said, if you go in there and pick up a trade, when you come out, I'll set you up in business. He also left me $500 and a note, $20. And his wife called me and told me to go and pick it up. And I went over and they gave me $500 with a letter, and Hoagland said, when you get out of the service, don't go to work for about a month. Get a hotel, buy a couple of suits, and just relax and get adapted back to civilization once again. So I didn't do that. I came home, went right to work, I got married, and had to go to work. It wasn't time to relax. So he did me a lot of favors. He guided me quite good. So appreciate that. So got another question?
Well, when you were on the farm, what did you do besides cutting grass?
Well,
how did the farm operate back then?
Okay, well, we raised wheat and corn. It was 2 main crops, and had a lot of milking cows. There was a lot of Jersey cows, and Mr. Gates was always trying to get a credited herd and get the champion. He sent his prize cows and stuff all over. But I had to milk the cows twice a day, help milk them, had to clean out the stables, had to feed them. So I like to go in that barn and talk about from the door in what we saw. Now inside the door of the barn, the main big barn, the first thing was a box stall. And we had an old horse in there, and the horse's name was Boulder. And we had a wagon. The wagon had 2 shafts on it. And you hook old Boulder up and you haul all the manure and stuff out and float it in the fields. And haul hay and stuff from the other barn, straw. And so then you went into the main barn after you went past Boulder, and all the left side had staunches. They had a yoke that went around the cow's neck, and the cow could put her head up or down. She could eat and she could lay down, but she couldn't get at it. And then each cow had a drinking fountain. And the drinking fountain she had, the drinking fountain, she put her nose in, push a little bar down, and water would come out and she could drink. And then we fed her hay, we fed her that. And then when she defecated, when she had exhaust, it all went into a ditch in the back. So we had to clean that out. That was a lot of work. So on the other side, they got staunches over there, but it wasn't that way when I was a child, a young man. On the other side, it was all box stalls. And in the middle was the bull. And that barnyard out there, that stone wall around that barnyard, that's where the bull stayed. And if you had a cow that needed attention, we threw her out there with him. So I had to clean that stable out for the bull. So you open these 2 doors and try to thaw it out. But he'd see you, and here he'd come. And he'd come up, and he'd leap in that place. He had to leap about 3 feet, and here he'd come. And I put my hands on the rail, and I'd go over, he'd miss me. He'd bump his head on the rail, but he missed me. He didn't get me.
So that stone wall was higher than it is now?
No, that was, the stone wall was there, and the door was up, the floor was up about 3 feet above that wall for the barn. And when he came across the barnyard, he had to leap up in there.
Okay.
I could get out before he got me. But it was a mess cleaning that stable out with that dumb bull. But then in the box stalls, we had young heifers, we called them, growing up to become a cow. We had an extra bull that was growing up and to do the duty when the old man got retired. So that's the way that barn was. Then directly across from that barn, there was a driveway going down to a lower barn, but directly across there was a building there and had a house in it and had an extra room in it. And if the cows didn't pass their TB tests and stuff, we isolated and put them in there. That's where they were. And shall I go on with that?
Sure.
All right. See, when Hoagland Gates built that place, he bought it in 1928. When he built it like a fort. There was a house on 3 corners, and there was an old corn crib on this corner. It was built in 1850. Between the corn crib and the first house was all open, and machinery's in there. Now, the corn crib was not used except for storage. We throw things in there, tools and things. And I'd like to mention one thing. As you come into that tool, we put the manure spreader and his mower that broke his arm and all that stuff. We had a long one there. It's all disappeared now. But in the corner of that building, there was a little office in there. But in there, we kept all kind of tools and special things that we needed for the farm. But something happened. In 1932, 34, we had an attack in this country by the Japanese beetle. And they were so thick when you went down the road with a car, you can't hardly keep them off your windshield. They'd block your vision. They were squashing on the windshield. So in there, we kept the material. There was a thing that had like this, and you put a bottle and you put a scent in there that attracted them, and they came, boom, hit that, and they dropped in the bottle, so we trapped them. And we used to dump them into a 40-quart milk can, old milk can, put them in there, and I took them out in the field and dumped them, put some kerosene, let them all mix up, take them out, they'd be 6 or 7 feet tall, 10 or 12 feet wide, the old Japanese beetles. And then the state came in, and when we plowed the fields, these grub worms would come up, which was Japanese beetles, and they'd give us a bucket. And we got 50 cents for a bucketful. But it took a couple hours to pick a bucketful. We had a lot of kids out there. We pick up all them bucketfuls, and that kind of helped decrease the population on that. So on that corner, we come out of the barn, and on that corner there was a house. And then we went up to the next corner, and that's where Mr. Gates lived. He lived, and there was a barn underneath an old bank barn, and you went downhill, went into that. So Mr. Gates took a bunch of iron, steel beams, and put it across to hold the load of the hay or straw upstairs, and he put his house up there. That's where he lived, on that corner. We went to the other corner of the house, and there was another house there, and that's where Ann Copley came there finally. When she got married, she moved in. But John Stevenson occupied the house in 1942. I graduated from submarine school in New London, Connecticut, and I came home to see this little woman, Faye Godson, the caretaker's daughter, which I was interested in, and married later. I come home, and so I'm going to tell this quick story. Mike says he can help fill it out if you have to. So when she moved in there, John and Bob Stevenson brothers from Philadelphia, and they owned the Baldwin Manufacturing Company in Elk Mills. And John moved down to Bell Hill. So they were city folks. And they used to have people come around and pick up the garbage and all. So what happens, Sal, the wife, there was John, Sal, and 2 daughters, and she called Mr. Iverson. She said, I got all this food and garbage. She said, what do I do with it? I can't get rid of it. There's nobody to pick up the garbage. She said, you need to buy a pig and just feed the pig all the garbage. So she bought a pig. So after 2 or 3 months, the pig was so dirty, it pooped all over the place, and flies all over the place, and it stunk. And she, being a city woman, she couldn't stand that. So she called Mr. Iverson up. She said, come over. So Iverson went over, and he looked at it, and she said, what am I going to do with this thing? I can't stand that. I got to get rid of it. He said, well, how much you want for it? She said, well, 3 months ago, I paid $25 for it. I only used it for 3 months. I'll take 15. So it's pretty good buy. Pretty good buy for a pig. So anyway, that's one of my stories. So one couple things I left out. When you went in that barn, when you went in the front door of the barn, that's the little boulders on the right. On the left, on the right-hand side was steps went upstairs. Under the steps was a medicine cabinet. And you kept all the medicine in there, bag, balm, and once in a while, cow cramp on her teeth and hurt it. We'd have to put juice on there, salve and everything. But they also had 40% iodine in there. So I rode old Boulder into his stall, and he had a big fat belly on him. And he pushed my foot up against the door, and there was a hinge there, and there was 3 screws sticking out. And then 3 screws went right across the top. I'm only 11 or 12 years old. Boom, scratched, cut my foot off almost. And cut it pretty hard, right across the top. So I went in there and got that 40% iodine poured in there. And I went home, and people said, well, you got to put fat meat on it. So I put fat meat on it, wrapped it up in an old hunk of sheet, but I had to walk from the Elk Mills all the way down to Jim Garrison's farm. Time I got there, the bandage went off. It got infected, but I never died. God had other things for me to do, so I didn't die. But old Boulder did that to me. And I say I got the medicine out there. So we got the fort. Now, on the 4th end of the place, there was a corn crib. And it was a double corn crib, because you're supposed to store your corn. Of course, the rats and the mice could get in because there was ventilating shafts in there. So anyway, the old corn crib was built in 1850. So when he came, he used the original corn crib, and they had this tool shop, that's it. So that made the whole square for the city. So Mr. Gates he bought an old fort at Tucson, Arizona. So every fall they'd take off for Tucson, Arizona, and then in the spring they come back here on the East Coast, because he had tuberculosis and he needed that dry climate. So anyway, I just found out that in 1850, that part of it. So he bought this fort at Tucson. He bought the whole history fort. So later on, he gave that old fort to the town, to the Historical Society in Tucson, Arizona. So let me see. Oh, there's one thing I must remember, and my friend Mike over there, Mike, he's got to get a picture of this. In the front yard, down next to the road, there's a little grove of big oak trees, all put together. Now, what happened when I was about 10 years old, I went and watched this. They went across the road over to the south, directly across the road, straight over, and there was a knoll out there with all these trees about maybe 10, 12 inches tall. So they built a wooden sled, put 2 horses on it, and they dug these trees up, and they brought them across the road and stood them all up. They're all imported. All those trees are from across the road. So I don't want to forget that, because...
Well, it's my understanding that there's existing trees out there now that are protected by the Maryland Historic Trust. And evidently when the farm was sold, that was a stipulation in the sale that these trees not be cut down, and
Yeah. Well,
so
that's-
would they be the same trees?
Same trees, that's how they got there.
Okay.
See, they didn't start originally. If you look at them, they're planted close together and all. And they're maybe 2.5 to 3 feet in diameter now, and real high. But that's how that grove of trees got there. They hauled them. And you see across the road, there was a ditch that went down, had a little bit of water run in it, drained all the fields. So you couldn't take a tractor across there. They had to use horses. And they came down across that ditch and up, took them over there, and they had a bunch of men working, stood them back up, dug holes and put them in there, and that's where the hell them trees got there. I'm probably the only guy that knows that. Praise the Lord, I know it.
So the house that's existing now, it's pretty dilapidated, but
Yeah.
who lived in that, or what was that
Well,
used
first,
for?
No, first, John's, that was built as a tenant house, according to the records. They said it was tenant house. But John Stevenson lived there in 42 when I came back from the war for vacation. And then after Ann Copley got married to Harold Copley, they moved in the house. They lived there until they finally sold all the property, moved to Pennsylvania.
So she didn't actually grow up living on that farm?
She was, the census in 1930, she was 8 years old, and Libby was 5. So they grew up on the farm. They grew up there.
Okay.
But they were a family. They didn't mess with us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, old Hoagland, he was a great guy, the old man, the father, but, the daughters and the wife and all. And I just found this out today. It's kind of interesting. Margaret Gates, his last name before she got married, was Mackey. Spelled the same way as Tucker. M-A-C-K-E-Y, Mr. Mackey. She was from Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So he bought some property, lived next door, and he ended up marrying her and bring her down here.
So how many years did you actually work there at the farm?
Oh, I worked from say 12 years old till I was 17. 5 years. And then I wanted to get up, but see, don't forget Mr. Gates helped me. And then once a week we cut grass all day, and I got out of hay. So let me talk about getting in the hay, because that's where I come in. So on the, I don't know which end to call, but on the road that goes in on that end of the barn, there's a big beam sticks out there. And we used to pull the hay in there. And we had a fork that went out like this, and Roy Giverson would stick it with his feet. And Jim Giverson on the other end, he had horses, and they had all this rope and pulleys. So up it would come, and here it would come into me, and I got a rope to trip it. And here it would come rolling down, see? And I would look, and I'd see it swinging, it would pow, I put one over there. Pow, I put one over there. And then I had to work around, and I had a tin roof on it. And it was so hot when I got downstairs, I'd take my shoes off and pour the water out. Get a drink of water and jump back on the truck back out to get more hay. And what we did at those, see, that things were really rough. We didn't know how to do, I mean, we didn't have the machinery you got today. So when you went down the row that was all piled up, the hay all come up on this fork and come over. It might be snakes and everything else coming at you. But I had to stay on the wagon and move the hay around till I got it leveled up. And back we'd come again, and this went on all day. So you can see a lot of Mr. Gates cutting grass with big relief once in a while. So,
I would say so.
yeah. So what else we're going to talk about?
So, did you ever go back to, after you came back
Yes.
from submarine school?
Yeah.
Did you go back to the farm?
After the Navy, I used to visit them, and here's what happened. Tucker Mackey wanted to set up the Elk Preservation Society because we found out that what was happening in the county, people from Pennsylvania and Delaware come down by an old mill down here. It was dilapidated. They buy the whole thing for $2,000. They'd tear all the stone down, all the slate, and pile it up, and haul it off to Delaware and build a mansion. All the stone was cut in one pile. So we were trying to prevent that. We're trying to preserve a little bit for future generations. So that's how we started the Elk Creek Preservation Society. So Tucker needed a lieutenant that he could dominate over and get his work done. So we had a meeting, and Mrs. Gates and Ann and Libby and I and Tucker at her house. They wanted me to be the president of the Elk Creek. And I said, now look, I'm so busy, I'm working all the time, like, you know. And they said, no, you're the man, you're the man. So I said, all right, I'll take it pro temp. I'll take it on a temporary to find somebody else. So I became the president for the first 10 years. And after that, I got real busy in my own life. So I told him, you find the new president and I'll stay on the board. You gotta have somebody else to give me, because old Ann Copley and all them people, they were running me down to the governor, running me down here. I had to go to Annapolis all the time and try to get grants and money. I got tired of it. So I said, I'm gonna quit now, but if you get somebody else, I'll stay on the board. So they got Harold Copley. He took president for a while. Ann was a historian and Libby was our secretary. So they talked me into it in that house. And that's where if you had the 4 houses on the 4 corners, and I talked about going through the barn and the little house, there the next house over, that was over top of another barn, which is an old bank barn, they called it. And you could drive a wagon in. You went up, we got pictures of it. You could drive a wagon in there and you could load the hay or the straw on each side. And that barn we kept straw in for the cows and stuff. And the other barn we kept the hay in.
Well, where'd he ever get the idea to build it like that?
I have an idea. See, he was a military man. He was a Marine. He was a Marines in World War I, and he got the idea to make it it's like a military. See, everything was closed up. It was all like one big fort. You had a driveway to get in, but it was like one big fort. And I think it was because of his military service. And then when he went to Tucson, he bought that old fort out there. So it must have been his military service.
So where did he make his money?
He had stock in some bacon powder company and stuff. And the Depression hurt him. 1929, when we had the Depression, hurt him financially. Because he had bought property way down on the eastern shore first, and then he bought property in Pennsylvania, then he bought property here, and he stayed here. But he had that's what I always heard, that he, like Rumford Bacon Powder or somebody like this, he had a stock in the company and he got so much every month he got. So that's what I heard. So he might have had other ways of making money, because he must have money. Because down in Talbot County, he bought property in Talbot County. He had a farm down there. Then he went to Pennsylvania and he bought a farm up there. And that's where he married his wife, Margaret. Then he finally come down here in 1928 and he stayed here.
So they had dairy cows.
That's what it was, dairy cows, but they were all registered Jersey dairy cows. And they were looking, there was two diseases. One was TB, and the other one, I forget what it was, but it had a name. But it was 2 diseases that had been tested. They were one of the few tested herds in the state of Maryland.
So who'd he sell his milk to?
Oh, it went Abbott's Farms up in Wilmington, but Abbott's Dairy. But you see, he didn't do that. See, James Giverson did that, and his boy Roy. Roy took over the farm where the farm museum is, and James had the other farm, but they worked together. And all the milk went out, and they picked it up. Fletch Wood had a son named Jim Woods, and he drove the truck. And they come in and got all the milk in 40-gallon cans. We had a problem. In the spring of the year, when you turned all the cows out, they ate a lot of garlic. So the company's getting a surplus of milk, and they got to have an excuse to dump something, so they send something back. So if the bacteria count's too high, they check the bacteria count too. And Jim Giverson would never allow any milk machines on his property. He had to do it all by hand, because the milk machines, he says, causes high bacteria because you can't clean them out right. So anyway, this is terrible, but we had a freezer, like it was water, filled with water, it was cool, and you put the milk cans down in there. He had something, I think they call it carbolic acid, and it put a few, like a teaspoon in each cup, kill the bacteria. Get a low bacteria count. If you got a high bacteria count, they'd send it back to you. Abbott's Dairy, they would sell it. So that's where the farm, the other guy owned the farm. He owned the farm. Gates did, but he didn't do any work around there. He had a tenant farmer just do everything.
So they didn't actually bottle their own milk, they sent it out?
No, we sent it up in 40-quart cans. This here, Jim Woods, out on Fletchwood Road, he was the son of Fletchwood, and named after him. And he would come and pick up the milk, had a big thing, they dumped it in.
Yep.
Big tank. Off it went to Abbott's Dairy. But that was the, you know, the milk was the main thing. That's where your paycheck was. All the hay and corn and stuff you raised was to feed your animals. Also, Jim Giverson liked to work with horses. He didn't like the tractors too much. But a sickle bar on a horse thing is only 4 feet wide. I'm running a little farm-haul tractor out there, and I got a 10-foot wide blade, and I'm cutting 20 times more hay in his, and I'm going faster. So, but these farmers are, here's a hedgerow, so that big tractor can't get in there. So he get in there with these horses, a little thing, and he cut all the hay. We baled it, see, he's saving money. So when I went by, here he is with these horses coming up, cutting them with a sickle bar. Here I go, and a young kid, about 12, 13, and I'd take that thing and I'd push in on the gas. I'd go, whoa, whoa. I'd make her scream, and the horse would jump up, and he'd say, "You mess with me." He'd cuss me, shake his fist, and I'd keep on going.
Well, there must have been other people helping on the farm besides.
Yeah, he had 6 hard hands.
Okay.
He kept 6 hard hands. And I don't think that included me. And I got a picture that it's not too good of a picture, but somebody could do a little cleaning up on it. But it's Roy Giverson, who was the farmer there, and one of his tenants named Jimmy Lindell, and Billy Murphy. Billy Murphy's in this little wagon holding on the boulder, and you see boulder, and you see the wagon. And he was on the Saratoga when it was, no, he was on the Saratoga, but he got off, he didn't get there in time. When they took the atom bomb to Tinnen and come back, they got sunk, killed about 750 sailors. He got off of it just before it left. I looked for his, I got the book and I looked for his name, it wasn't on there. So I asked his brother Jim, I said, "Jim, how come Bill didn't?" He said, "Well, he got off just before the ship sailed." So anyway, his on that wagon. I got a picture of little Billy with a pot belly, no shirt on, standing holding on a boulder. It's right at that building I told you to use for an isolation building for the cows. That was
Okay.
sick. Yeah. All right, there must be some other questions.
So there was a lot more there. I have some pictures that I printed out from the
Oh, good.
Maryland Historic Trust.
Yeah, I got a bunch of them. I got them with me, but you might have done a better job of me, though I put them small.
Yeah.
All right. You see, this is the house on the corner where the road comes in, this one here.
George, hold the picture up to the camera if you can.
Okay, that's a good idea. All right, all right. Now then, this is a picture here of the house where Aunt Copley lived, and that's the old bank barn that we put the straw and the hay in.
Okay.
And down here is where the corn crib and the tool sheds and stuff were for that. So that's what that is. And there, between this house and Hoagland Gates' house, there was a walk that went down right alongside there. You could walk to one of the other little walkway.
So could you get from building to building without going outside? No. No. It was just.
Yeah, it's all I knew.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's that. All right. I have to get oriented and I'll turn it around. Oh, I'm kind of fuzzy about that, but let's get another one. Because some of these things are repeats.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to this one. Now I want to say something about this one. When I was a child, this is the barn. I'll put this up for the camera. This is the barn where we took the hay. We parked right here, and that's the hangar that you...
So this is the barn that's existing now?
Yes, yes.
That's what the museum's in?
And upstairs is where the museum is.
Yep.
And this came, they had to come down with a chain, and you put they had 4 arms. You stuck it in the hay, 4 arms. You stuck it in the hay to pull it up. Then when it came up and hit the track, it came right on back, because Jim Giverson's over here on this side, way over in that corner with 2 horses pulling it up. Well, the minute the load dropped, the load come off and they stopped. They knew. So that was the old original barn, and that's where old Boulder was right inside. But the thing I want to mention, there was no silo there when I was a child. I don't know when they put that silo in, because they did something else. Mm-hmm. In that barn on the right-hand side, they took all them stalls out and put staunches in there.
That's all right.
Put staunches. I gotta watch my little club chubby boys.
You go ahead. Keep going. You're fine.
Yeah. All right. So, so that's it. That's the barn, and this is the barnyard where the bull was, and this is a door here that I had to open to throw the manure out.
Right. So this stone wall's still there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the maps it says that that's our barnyard. I don't really picture that as a barnyard, but you know, I was thinking, what do we do with the cows? You know, cold weather, rain and all that, but we left them in the stalls. But I had to think and think, you can't put them in the field when it's freezing and leave them out there. So anyhow, that's the original barn. I don't remember any silo. And there's where we took the hay up, took it into the thing. And it had little ventilators on it, had a tin roof. And that's where it got so hot up there. I don't know if that worked.
Because until recently, right in front of the barn was the corn crib. Was like a 2-story corn crib.
Yeah, well, the corn crib, the way it is, if you're looking at the barn, this corn crib is here, there's a driveway in between.
Yes.
Yeah, barn, right?
So is this one of the trees?
Oh, wait, no, I don't think so. They're planted as a clump.
Okay.
And they're right out next to the road. Now, you see, there's the back side of the barn, and here is the fence that they put around from the barnyard.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the back side of the barn, right there.
Okay.
All right, let's see what else we got here. Some of these pictures, Paul, I might not, you know, I looked at my stuff and some of them, you see, the houses are so grown up now when they took these pictures.
Mm-hmm.
See, they were dilapidated and deserted after Ann sold the property, moved away, nobody lived in them. So this was a house that Ann lived in. And you come up here and you stepped up and you went in the kitchen here and you went in the living room in here.
Okay.
And the kitchen in here was, you went right into the kitchen. And on down here, I better put this up so the camera can see it. See, I'll repeat that. This was the house that Ann lived in, that right-hand corner.
Mm-hmm.
And they went in this one way, but most people went into the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
You went in the kitchen, turned left, and went in the other rooms. But the Elk Creeks, when we were forming, we met there a couple times a month. At the place. And on down here at this side was where that corn crib and the sheds were. But that corn crib formed one quarter. There was 3 houses on the other corner. A corn crib made one. But I was surprised that corn crib was built in 1850. Let's see. I looked at these. I copied most of these, but I copied on 4 to 6. See that some of these pictures, you don't mind if I do this, do you?
No, help yourself.
I got to look at something. You see, one of the things I don't have a good picture of, the house that the Gates lived in, underneath was a barn.
Yeah.
And they didn't keep nothing in it hardly. And they used to have square dances and have meetings of all kind down there. And one time I was with a man, and they had cattle shows in the front yard where the oak trees are.
Yeah.
And they give people prizes if they won. And she gave me something if I ever find it. It's up to my other house in Elk Mills. If I find it, I'm going to give it to the museum because it's one of the cups says Broadland Farms and it's a prize. And it's dated. It was given to me by Ann. Nice little prize thing. Metal. It's all metal. So I don't.
So where did the people come from that participated in this show or contest? Were they local or did they?
Yeah, one of the families that I remember is very local. It's the Krause farm where they're building that 200-acre
down on 213.
Yeah, house because you see the people that was Jersey farmers raised Jersey cows, and they were friendly. You see, these houses are so grown up now that when these pictures were taken. See, they're so grown up, it's hardly possible for me to recognize much. So, yeah, there was no between them houses. There were just 4 houses, 3 houses and a corn crib. So, I'm looking at these.
I think I had always heard that they were all connected so that you didn't have to go outside to get from one structure to the next, but that's not true.
No. See, when you went from Ann's house to Hoagland Gates' house, next to parallel to the road, parallel to 316, and when you went from one to the other, it was a walkway. But it went right alongside the barn, the barn that was they call the bank barn, where you come up, there's a picture there. The last picture of this series shows a picture of that barn that Harold Copley took. And you drove up with your wagon, went right on in, and you unloaded on both. There was a mow on the right, now on the left. So we put the straw over there, and put the straw over there for the cows. They had needed a lot of straw. So we put it over there, and then we had to haul it back. A little boulder. Some of these pictures I can't quite make out. So I'm looking for the one that, I was looking for the one that Harold copied. There's that. So I'm holding up here, but I would like to have that one because it explains the bank farm. See, it was built too around about 1850, but that's a German thing, what they call a bank farm. When you come in with a load of hay and you have the horses with all the hay, you come up a rise like that and they go in. And that's sort of a German invention. That's what I've always been told, heard.
How's it going?
Let's see, there's the corn crib.
So,
And that old corn crib that stood on that corner across from the thing, that old corn crib was built in 1850. And we really didn't use it for anything. We had old plowshares, all kind of junk. We threw it in metal, we threw it in there, just laid it in.
Okay.
So that's the corn crib right there. And that, I'd never realized that when you asked me to do this talk, and I did a little research, and found that I've learned a lot. See,
So did it always have the cedar shakes or whatever the
Yeah.
siding was? Because that
Yeah.
was unusual.
yes. Yeah. So, it looks like I'm not doing too good for you on these pictures.
That's
So,
okay.
yeah,
You
I'll
did
let it
fine.
Yeah. So what else can we